The Utah night was cold, the kind that seeps into your bones, as a single gunshot tore through the crowded auditorium at Utah Valley University. The echo lingered, sharp and final, silencing the murmurs of a prove-me-wrong debate that had promised intellectual sparring, but delivered a nightmare. Charlie Kirk, the brash voice of a generation of conservatives, crumpled to the stage, his microphone clattering beside him. Screams erupted, a tidal wave of panic sweeping through the students, their faces illuminated by the frantic glow of phone screens as they texted loved ones or posted blurry videos to X. By morning, the nation was ablaze with the news. A fracture in an already divided America had just split wider, and one man was ready to pour gasoline on the wound. Donald Trump stood on the White House lawn, his trademark red tie flapping in the wind, his voice booming with rehearsed fury. "Radical left lunatics," he declared to a cluster of reporters, their cameras clicking like vultures circling a carcass. "Absolute lunatics, tearing our great country apart. We're going to fix this. Believe me." The words were barely out of his mouth before they ricocheted across cable news and X, a rallying cry for his base. No suspect had been named, no motive uncovered, yet Trump was already crafting a narrative, painting an enemy without a face. It was a lie, bold and reckless, and it would unravel, but not before it left scars. The truth was slower, messier, buried under the weight of a dysfunctional system. Law enforcement was scrambling, their efforts hampered by an FBI hollowed out by Trump's own hand. Kash Patel, the agency's director and a loyalist with more ambition than experience, had announced a $100,000 reward for information on the shooter, as if money could mask the chaos within his ranks. A grainy photo of a hooded figure was all they had, plastered across every news outlet with a plea for tips to an 1-800 number. Patel's FBI was a shadow of its former self, gutted by purges that ousted seasoned agents for the sin of insufficient loyalty to Trump. The Salt Lake City division, once a hub of competence, was leaderless after Patel fired its head weeks earlier. Rumor had it, the man hadn't posted enough praise for Trump on X. Now, with a killer on the loose, Patel was in New York, posing for photos at a 9/11 memorial, while J.D. Vance, of all people, was dispatched to Utah to oversee the manhunt. The optics were perfect, the results were disastrous. In Chicago's South Side, Maria Alvarez sat in her cramped apartment, the TV flickering with images of the Utah campus. Her son, Miguel, a freshman at Utah Valley, had been in that auditorium, close enough to hear the gunshots crack. "Mom, it was so loud," he'd told her over the phone, his voice trembling like a child's. "I thought I was next." Maria, a single mother who worked double shifts at a grocery store, felt her heart seize. She'd lost her brother, Javier, to a stray bullet in a gang shooting 10 years earlier, and the wound was still raw. She'd voted for Democrats, Obama, Biden, Harris, because they spoke of curbing gun violence, of protecting communities like hers. Now, hearing Trump's voice on the news, blaming left-wing lunatics without a shred of evidence, she felt a familiar rage. "He doesn't care about us," she whispered, clutching a faded photo of Javier, his smile frozen in time. "He doesn't care about Miguel, or me, or anyone who's lost someone." Halfway across the country, in a weathered diner in rural Ohio, Tom Brennan scrolled through X on his phone, the morning rush long gone. The platform was a firestorm of speculation. "Trans shooter," one post screamed, claiming the killer's ammunition was etched with transgender and anti-fascist ideology. Another, from a MAGA influencer with a blue checkmark, demanded the State Department investigate anyone who'd ever criticized Kirk online. Tom, who'd voted for Trump in 2016 but turned away after January 6th, shook his head. "Same old playbook," he muttered to his wife Ellen, who was refilling ketchup bottles behind the counter. "Stir up fear, point fingers, don't bother with facts." The New York Times was already debunking the story, citing a senior law enforcement official who said the ATF hadn't verified the claims about the ammunition. The Wall Street Journal, which broke the story, was backpedaling, but the damage was done. "It's just noise," Tom said, tossing his phone onto the table. "And it's making everything worse." In Washington, D.C., the air was thick with tension. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stepped up to a podium, her eyes fierce behind her glasses. To cast blame without evidence, to exploit a tragedy before the FBI has even apprehended a suspect, is absolutely irresponsible, she said, her voice cutting through the humid September air. "This isn't leadership. It's a failure. Donald Trump doesn't care about keeping people safe. He doesn't care about the families grieving, or the college campuses, now paralyzed by fear. He cares about his photo op, his authoritarian project. Her words were a lightning bolt, electrifying those who felt silenced by the chaos. On X, supporters amplified her message, posting clips with captions like "AOC speaks truth" and blue heart emojis flooding the threads. The lie Trump spun, that a radical left shooter was behind Kirk's death, was already fraying at the edges. The ATF's preliminary report, rushed and incomplete, had sparked the frenzy with its talk of ideology on the ammunition. But it was a house of cards. Glenn Thrush and Devlin Barrett, veteran reporters at the New York Times, published a follow-up, quoting a source with direct knowledge of the investigation. "The report hasn't been verified," they wrote. "It doesn't match other evidence and may have been misread." The rifle, found in a wooded area near the campus, offered no clear answers. Yet Kash Patel, ever the showman, had tweeted about the trans shooter before the facts were in, his posts racking up thousands of retweets before he quietly deleted them. "He's not solving crimes," AOC said in a follow-up interview, her voice laced with contempt. "He's chasing clout." Kamala Harris, watching the crisis unfold, knew words alone wouldn't suffice. From the vice president's residence, she delivered a televised address, her presence commanding yet warm. "This is a time for unity, not division," she said, her eyes meeting the camera as if speaking to every American individually. "We mourn Charlie Kirk's death, as we mourn every life lost to violence. But we cannot let fear or falsehoods dictate our path. The American people deserve leaders who seek truth, who prioritize safety, who care about the families left behind." Her speech was a balm to people like Maria Alvarez, who watched from her Chicago apartment, tears streaming down her face. For the first time since Miguel's call, Maria felt seen, her pain acknowledged by someone with power. Barack Obama, in a rare public appearance in Chicago, added his voice to the chorus. Standing in a community center not far from Maria's neighborhood, he spoke with the gravitas of a man who'd seen America at its best and worst. "We cannot allow tragedies to be twisted into tools of division," he said, his voice steady, but heavy with emotion. "This administration's failure to act, to lead, to even investigate properly, is a betrayal of the American people. We deserve better." His words struck a chord with Emily Chen, a 20-year-old college student in California who'd been glued to her laptop since the shooting. Emily, who'd organized campus rallies against gun violence, felt a spark of hope. "He gets it," she told her roommate Sarah as they watched Obama's speech online. "This isn't just about Kirk. It's about all of us, about stopping this cycle." The media, meanwhile, was a runaway train. Cable news panels dissected every rumor, from the unverified trans shooter claim to wild theories about Antifa training camps. On X, the noise was deafening. The Kirk killer and jock leftist lunatics trended for days, fueled by MAGA influencers and bots. One thread, retweeted 50,000 times, claimed the shooter was a trans Antifa operative funded by shadowy left-wing groups. Another demanded the State Department investigate anyone who'd ever criticized Kirk's ideology, as if dissent were a crime. In a Texas bar, a group of Trump supporters watched Fox News, cheering as a pundit echoed Trump's "lunatics" line. "They're coming for us," one man growled, slamming his beer on the table. "It's war." Across the bar, a young woman named Carla, a nurse who'd voted for Biden, shook her head in silence. "This is why we're stuck," she whispered to her friend. "They're fighting a war that doesn't exist." The real war was against the truth. The FBI's failures under Patel were impossible to ignore. Once a pillar of competence, the agency had been gutted by Trump's purges, its ranks filled with loyalists who fumbled basic procedure. The manhunt for Kirk's killer was a case study in chaos. 24 hours became 48, then 72, with no suspect in custody. Patel's $100,000 reward was a publicity stunt, not a strategy. "Money doesn't fix incompetence," said J.B. Pritzker, Illinois' Democratic governor, at a press conference in Springfield. "What we need is leadership that puts people over politics." Pritzker, who'd championed gun control and community investment, spoke with the conviction of someone who'd seen the toll of violence up close. In Chicago, where shootings were a daily reality, his policies had funded youth programs and mental health clinics. Imperfect steps, but steps nonetheless. Trump offered nothing but division. For Maria Alvarez, Pritzker's words were a lifeline. She'd seen her neighborhood torn apart by guns, her brother's death a constant reminder of what was at stake. Democratic leaders like Pritzker, Harris, and Obama weren't perfect, but they were fighting for people like her, people who lived with the fear of losing another loved one. Trump, by contrast, was silent on the FBI's failures, on the lax gun laws that let weapons flood the streets, on the rhetoric that turned neighbors into enemies. "He doesn't see us," Maria told her pastor, her voice cracking as she sat in a pew after Sunday service. "He doesn't see Miguel, or me, or anyone who's hurting. He's too busy playing king." The ghost of January 6th haunted the crisis, its shadow lengthening with each passing day. Trump's new Republican January 6th commission, launched quietly amid the Kirk shooting, was a brazen attempt to rewrite history. Its mission was to re-examine the insurrection, but everyone knew its true purpose: to paint the rioters as patriots, to erase the violence that had shaken the nation. The commission ignored stories like that of Sergeant Aquilino Ganell, a 17-year veteran of the Capitol Police who'd faced down Trump's mob. Ganell, an Iraq War veteran, had seen bloodshed before, but January 6th was different. Savage, personal, a betrayal of the country he'd sworn to protect. The mob's fists and pipes left him with injuries so severe he could no longer meet the physical requirements of his job. Forced to retire, he now lived on a reduced income, struggling to provide for his wife and 2 daughters. "Trump pardoned those people," Ganell told CNN, his voice thick with pain. "The ones who broke my body, who broke my spirit. He let them walk free." Those pardons were a wound that refused to heal. Trump's decision to release January 6th rioters, many convicted of violent felonies, had unleashed havoc. A Virginia man, pardoned on Trump's first day, was arrested weeks later for burglarizing homes in his neighborhood. Others faced charges of child sex abuse, robbery, assault. "These are the people Trump calls heroes," said Jamie Raskin, the Maryland congressman leading a Democratic subcommittee to investigate the pardons. "He's not protecting America. He's endangering it." Raskin's subcommittee was a beacon of accountability, determined to honor officers like Ganell and the hundreds of others who'd suffered, physically, psychologically, or both. It was a fight for truth in a nation at risk of amnesia. As the days stretched on, the Kirk shooting became a mirror reflecting America's deepest divides. Trump's trans shooter lie collapsed under scrutiny, the ATF's final report finding no evidence of ideological engravings on the ammunition. But the damage was done. His base was inflamed, his narrative cemented. On X, hashtags like Josh Kirk Killer and leftist lunatics drowned out calls for reason, while MAGA rallies echoed Trump's war cries. Yet voices like Harris, Obama, and Pritzker pierced the chaos, offering a vision of a nation that could heal, if only it had leaders who cared. For Maria Alvarez, clutching her brother's photo, the choice was clear. For Tom Brennan, shaking his head at the diner, it was obvious. For Emily Chen, typing a blue heart into a YouTube comment, it was undeniable. Trump's lies, his recklessness, his disregard for the pain of ordinary people made him unfit to lead. In the end, the tragedy wasn't just Charlie Kirk's death, or the FBI's collapse, or the lie Trump spun to inflame his followers. It was the betrayal of a nation desperate for unity, for safety, for leaders who saw its people as more than pawns in a power game. As the sun set over Utah Valley University, where a makeshift memorial of flowers and candles marked the spot where Kirk fell, the question hung heavy in the air. Would America choose truth over lies, compassion over chaos? The answer lay with its people, people like Maria, Tom, and Emily, who, despite their fear, still believed in a better tomorrow. They were the ones who would decide, not with hashtags or headlines, but with their voices, their votes, their unwavering demand for a country that cared.